Hello and welcome to Page and Screen with John Paul Sarney. Today I'm very excited to be talking about one of the movies that I remember so vividly well growing up in the 80s and the late 80s and the early 90s. There were so many amazing big Hollywood movies that came out that probably defined a lot of how I see the entertainment business now. And the film that we're going to be talking about with Simon Braund is Total Recall, and this is the book that he has just released, Total Recall: The Official Story of the Film. Simon is a British writer. He's a contributor to Empire Magazine, the Sunday Times, London Evening Standard, the Financial Times, and Time Out, as well as some books on the greatest movies you'll never see, as well as Orson Welles and Janis Joplin, some work there. So, Simon Braund, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us. So it's so amazing that this book has come out because I remember just so vividly the imagery and the sci-fi work of this movie from 1990 when the film came out. I remember the trailer. I remember watching. This is before the internet really. So it was, I
Yes.
remember seeing the like Arnold Schwarzenegger and people going on the talk shows and the clips, the very famous clip of him, walking and through security and taking the face off and throwing the head.
Yeah.
It's an iconic, it has a cult following. It's an iconic film. So, but what I didn't realize until reading the book, because it wasn't until much later that I started to think about IP in terms of my own business, is that it's actually from Philip K. Dick. It's from a short
Yes.
story.
Yeah, very loosely based on a short story by Philip K. Dick called "We Can Remember It for You Wholesale," um, which touches on it has. And when I say loosely, I mean very loosely. It has the same kind of themes. A lot of Philip K. Dick stories had the nature of reality and memory, that kind of thing. So, but it's a very much more low key affair than the movie, obviously.
Right, because once we get to the movie, the story is essentially about a man who can't quite afford a holiday to Mars, so he goes to a company that can implant that memory in his mind, so he feels like he's Ben, but then it becomes a bit of a mind jumble, and we can't quite tell, even us in the audience, we don't quite know what is real and what is in the present and what is in the past.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah. I mean, the whole thing about the movie is you never actually know whether things are happening in real time and whether Douglas Quaid, Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, is actually on Mars having these adventures, or whether it's all happening in his head while he's on Earth, sitting in a chair at the company called Recall, which implants the memories.
Right. But now to get to the movie, which is a lot of what the book is about, is really was quite the journey to get there. But I mean, initially, let's just set the table a little bit because sci-fi movies really were kind of coming of age at this time. I mean, we talk about the sort of the Amblin years and movies like 2001. I mean, was this where does this film sit in the timeline of great science fiction movies? I mean, it seems like it was in quite a big moment, a big bursting moment for the genre.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, the kind of modern sci-fi era began really with 2001, um, Space Odyssey. I think really Total Recall. I mean, when it came out, it was the most expensive movie ever made. It was an absolutely huge movie, and I think it really did usher in that era of the mega sci-fi blockbuster. You had Terminator with Schwarzenegger again, and then I think after Total Recall, it took it up another notch with Terminator 2. But I think Total Recall was kind of the first on that step to the really massive, um, huge sci-fi blockbusters.
Yeah, and Arnold Schwarzenegger certainly had really took a hand in putting the film together, but he wasn't the first idea. Initially, you talk in the book about this film had been in development for about 16 years before it
Yeah.
finally got made, and it was initially going to be David Cronenberg directing, and there were a couple of different actors, right?
Yeah. In fact, I think originally it was going to be Bruce Beresford who who was going to do it, and then that fell through. Yes, then David Cronenberg did a lot of work on it, wrote a very uh, Cronenberg-esque version of the script. I think yes, he was going to do it with. I'm not sure. There was a lot of people who were mentioned in connection with it. Patrick Swayze at some point was on board. I think there was talk of doing it with Richard Dreyfuss at some point, which a time when it would have been a very different movie, probably a lot closer to the Philip K. Dick novel, not such an action movie. But yeah, it went through a lot of incarnations before it ended up as what it actually became. The David Cronenberg movie would have been a very different affair indeed.
Right, and the was it the Cronenberg one that was, it was kind of shut down just in really at the beginning of pre-production, and it was originally gonna be like a $20 million movie, not a $40 million movie.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think they did, do some pre-production, they did some there's quite a lot of, concept art and, model work in the book from the Cronenberg version. But, yeah, I think, just the usual thing, the financing ran out and, yeah, and then it was, picked up, by Dino De Laurentiis for a while. I think that the Dino De Laurentiis version, that was set to star Patrick Swayze.
Mm. And then when Arnold Schwarzenegger, who obviously we all know now so well from the images of this movie, how did he come into the sphere of the film? And he really was everything to the movie, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was really the driving force that got it made. He had been interested in it while Dino De Laurentiis owned the rights, but De Laurentiis didn't want him in the movie, and I think that had uh, uh, some influence on later events because I think when De Laurentiis went bankrupt, Arnold swooped in and told his friends at Carolco, Andy Vanya and Mario Kassar, to jump in and pick up the rights to Total Recall for a bargain in kind of the post bankruptcy yard sale of De Laurentiis's assets. So I think he got it pretty. He got it. They got it cheap. Yeah, and he was because he had been interested in doing it for quite a long time. So he seized his chance, and it was I think an opportunity to kind of have a little hit back at De Laurentiis, who didn't want him in the movie.
So what happens at that point? Because there's I think you say there's about 45 drafts of the script.
Oh, that's yeah. Well, again, I mean, depending on who you believe. I mean, I've read certain reports that there's 90 drafts of the script. I mean, I've tried to find as many as I could. Um, the Writers Guild Library has a couple. I found some more at the Academy Library, but it's yeah. I mean, no one's really ever going to know now how many there were, but yeah, there's a lot. There was an awful lot of versions, yeah. Because like I said, went through so many different incarnations down the years that every time somebody else picked it up, there was a new director attached, or a new star attached, or new producers. Then obviously there's going to be, you know, they want the script revised to fit their vision. So yeah, it went through an awful lot of revisions.
I was just curious about the sort of process because as you talk about the directors, I mean there were so many versions of the script and so many directors had had started to put their stamp on it, but then Arnold Schwarzenegger came in, and then ultimately what happened? So we find our final director.
Well, yeah. So yes, and again, it was kind of things converging. I think Schwarzenegger was a very big fan of Paul Verhoeven's. He'd seen RoboCop. Paul Verhoeven was off the back of RoboCop, was kind of the hottest director in Hollywood at the time. That was not a huge production, but it showed that he could handle a big Hollywood sci-fi action movie. And I think it really happened. Schwarzenegger bumped into Verhoeven at a restaurant one evening. They were both out for dinner. They both said, "We'd love to work." Each one said they'd love to work with the other, and then the perfect opportunity was to do Total Recall together. Arnold had Carolco had the rights, and I think it was Arnold who kind of put all the pieces together, really. I think it really does kind of it is when Schwarzenegger entered the picture, that's when it actually came together. Because it kept I mean, the main reason it kept falling apart in previous incarnations was it was just too expensive, and nobody could really get the money together to make it the movie that it needed to be. And it was only when it had a star of Arnold's magnitude, although he wasn't the star that he became at the time, he was kind of on the cusp of that. But to have a star of that magnitude, and you had Carol Co because they had all the Rambo money, so they had the money to do it. They had the star, and they found the right director in Paul Verhoeven. So just really, after so long, languishing in development hell, as they say, that it just at that moment everything converged. Everything was in kind of the right place at the right time.
And in putting together a movie of this scale, because, we have to remember the late '80s and 1990 when the film finally came out, the visual effects game was not really existent quite yet. I mean, you talk about when they were scouting to do the movie, which is largely set on Mars.
Mm.
They were looking at different parts of, like, the American Southwest, and, they said, "Well, we can't have, trees and certain things because they
Yeah.
couldn't the technology wasn't there to paint them out yet." And
Yeah, that's
so
right.
they would, they could put like a build something around a tree to cover it up, but you can only do that so often. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, this production all came together in Mexico.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah. Studio Churubusco in Mexico. Yeah. Yeah, so they built I mean, I think they filmed a couple of, location sequences, in the I think in, Arizona or Nevada desert, something like that, but basically, yeah, the whole of the Total Recall world was built on sound stages at, Churubusco in Mexico, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that because it sounded like a very unique experience. I mean, just the production itself, shooting 6-day weeks on 8 different sound stages,
Yeah.
and it was an outdated facility, shall we say?
I don't wanna, uh denigrate them, but I think yes. I mean, I know Churubusco these days is an absolutely first class state of the art studio, but I think back then, yes, it was not perhaps um, quite up to the standard that Hollywood people were used to working with. Just to say that, I'm not saying but, but don't really say anything more than that. But yeah, I mean, it was an absolutely huge production because as I say, as you said, I mean, there weren't any real digital effects then, so everything that you see in the movie had to be built and to scale.
Right, and the making of the movie, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of stunt work and all of it, but there several people did, get injured, and, I think that even the director had some issues, during this time because it was also a very long production, right? It was a long time to be in on filming anything.
Yeah, yes, yeah, a long time. And the issue with Paul Verhoeven is that he's just an absolute workaholic, and he worked himself literally to the point of collapse. There's stories that he was filming scenes, and I think they're saying they were shooting location scenes um, in Mexico City, and he had an ambulance standing by to with had to be pumped full of fluids and that's just the way he works. But I think yeah, it was obviously a very arduous shoot. I mean, Mexico City, you got pollution, which again back then was a lot worse than these days. The altitude, and I think it also the sets as well. Just being in that enclosed environment like that, it's not particularly healthy. But yeah, I think it was a very arduous shoot. Yeah. Yeah, I don't I mean, nobody I spoke to complained about it. I think everybody, counted it as, one of the great moments of their lives. But yeah, it was, yeah, very tough. Yeah, like you said, and, when you're shooting that much action and stuff and, with a lot of stunts and, fight scenes, things like that, yeah, people get injured now and again. I don't think there wasn't anything very serious, but,
Mm.
yeah.
And as you were putting this book together and learning, kind of about what happened and the different tales from different people involved, um, did you speak to I mean, did you try to speak to everyone? I mean, to call the book the official sort of record of a film is, is a tall order. So I imagine
Yeah.
the research and the interviews must have been, very, very thorough.
As thorough as I could make them, yes. Yeah, I mean, the problem you have is, uh, particularly with cast members. I mean, I did, try to get as many as I could. But it's difficult to get hold of them when they're talking about a movie that they made 35 years ago. But I did talk to Paul Verhoeven at length. I spoke to him a few times, and I did speak to Arnold Schwarzenegger about it, and a lot of the technical crew. I spoke to all of the well, I say all of the effects people, like Eric Brevig and Sean Brose and Mark Stetson. The only person, sadly, I didn't get to talk to on that score was Rob Bottin, who's the makeup special effects genius, really, who just disappeared off the face of the earth, sadly, a couple of decades ago, really. But yeah, and I spoke to yeah. I mean, I think the first person I interviewed for it was the production designer, Bill Sandell, who was just fantastic. He really, really set the scene because he was just production designer is I think people don't really know what a production designer does. They're the one who basically is in charge of the whole thing or how the whole thing looks, and so he was in charge of all the set building and everything like that. So he, really he he really, really gave me a sense of what it was like, the scale of the production, building those sets. I mean, you know, things like the hotel set. I mean, that's all a set. I mean, I think a lot of people watch the movie and think that's shot in a real hotel. It's not. Everything in those scenes was built for the movie on a soundstage, the working elevators and everything. So and he said, that because the schedule was so tight, they would film on it, spend however long it took to build a monumental set like that. Then they'd shoot on it, and then they'd move on to the next one, and they'd have to dismantle that set and straight away start building the next one for when the production came back to shoot on that. So, yeah, a really just a huge, huge task. And again, like I said, I mean, so much stuff now would just be done in post production digitally, but they didn't have that option, so just had to build everything you see. Really is real.
And beyond the set design, I mean, the special effects that we do see, I mean, as we go from finishing the production into post-production, what is that transition like? How much of it was kind of in-camera effects versus things that did happen in post?
Um, hmm. I mean, a lot happens in post, even when you're doing practical effects, but an awful lot of the I mean, really all of the effects you see in the movie, apart from the famous sequence where Arnold goes through the X-ray machine at the at, um, at the subway station, they're all practical effects. They're all in camera effects. So, yeah, I mean, when you see he's talking to uh, George, what's the Kuatu, of course, who's growing out of his host's chest. That's that's basically a very elaborate puppet. There's like 8 people standing around off camera, working that puppet with, you know, wires and gears and hydraulic motors and stuff. So it's all everything is really in camera, and yeah, I mean, yes, certain things are done in post production, but again, everything you see on the screen, it was actually done on set. I know they did a lot of stuff. I think they did the whole sequence with the where he arrives on Mars and he's in disguise as the lady with, and then the head opens. That again, that was shot in a studio in California after they wrapped in Mexico. But all of that is um, again, it's all practical effects. They had to build that head so it would work and it would open up like that on camera, and just incredibly intricate, beautiful stuff. And then the interesting thing, really, about I think about Total Recall is because it represents the absolute kind of apex of those kind of practical effects, right on the again on on the cusp of movie effects becoming pretty much all digital. Because I mean, there is the one sequence in it that is claimed as the first motion capture sequence, which it isn't quite, but um, so it kind of it's right on the point where, as I said, practical effects were at their absolute zenith just before digital effects began to take over.
And in the book, you have amazing, photographs of, characters like Kuatu, but then also, a lot of the production design, the set design. It's an incredibly, visual book, so there's a lot of things to chew on as you go through and read the stories. And I think it was kind of in that moment when you look at, I mean, I think Star Wars is a great example because you think of something like Return of the Jedi, where Jabba the Hutt was essentially a huge kind of puppet with,
Yeah,
wet, fatty folds and things, and then you come to, the later Star Wars, the middle Star Wars movies that were almost all CGI, and you can see, especially for actors, working with, something that is real and tangible, something tactile, I think is a very different experience, and
yeah,
I still think that we in the audience feel that. I think that we
yeah,
feel that
definitely.
connection even
Yeah,
stronger.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you get that definitely from watching Total Recall. I mean, you can see that they're, that they they are what they are. They're practical effects. They are very, very elaborate, brilliantly made and designed puppets. But you can tell. But I think that adds to the charm of it. That's one of the things
Yeah.
I enjoy about watching Total Recall now. I love seeing those old. Well, I say old, man. I guess they are these days. But yeah, it's just great to see that art taken to that level, which I think is what you see in Total Recall.
And when the film finally comes out and we see all that on screen, the reception was a little bit mixed, wasn't it, when the film came out? I think that some people didn't quite,
Yeah.
go for the fantasy of it all.
Yeah, it did get very mixed reviews. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people hated it. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people underestimated it, to be honest.
Mm.
Because I think because I mean, it's a non-stop action movie. I mean, as soon as Arnold goes and sits in that chair at Recall and it all goes wrong, it just doesn't stop from that point on. It's just a freight train from that point on, and you know, it, it's extremely violent.
It almost earned an X rating, didn't it?
It did, yeah, yeah. They came very close to getting X rating. Yes, yeah, they had to. Yeah, I think they sent several cuts to the MPAA before they got the 18 rating or whatever. I can't remember what rating it got now, but yeah, yeah. So I think that's what a lot of critics, they just saw that and didn't see there was a lot more to it, because I think there's a lot more Philip K. Dick in there than people give it credit for. And it's at the end of the day, it's a Paul Verhoeven movie, and Paul Verhoeven is not going to make a movie where there isn't something more going on below the surface. And it does have a definitely does have some of that philosophical uh, um, content, where it does, musing on, again, like the Philip K. Dick story, musing on the nature of reality and the nature of memory and a lot of things like that. I mean, Paul Verhoeven himself says that, it's an obvious question to ask him: is it real or is it recall? And he says, "I don't know. You don't know." And you don't, there is no way of knowing. That's one of the brilliant things about the script, is that it works perfectly as a straightforward action movie, but there's also that element at every level. There's nothing that gives it away as whether it's actually happening or whether it's happening in Douglas Quaid's head.
But I think those are the best moments in a lot of movies, and there's always something, if it's, whether it's Pulp Fiction or some sci-fi movie that we talk about, afterwards in the parking lot or at a diner. It's, it keeps the audience guessing, which is really fun.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I also want to say that, the fascinating thing about this is towards the end of the book, you talk about how the movie, I think it was like the number 6 movie in 1990, the year that it came out. But the
Mm.
the incredible thing is when I took a look, and if you'll indulge me for a minute, the top movies that came out in that year, and I look at them now, it's absolutely incredible because the top movies that year were Ghost, Pretty Woman, Home Alone, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Hunt for Red October, Total Recall, Die Hard 2, Dick Tracy, Driving Miss Daisy, and Back to the Future 3. And we look back now, these are enormous, huge movies, but they're also so different from one another. Some of
Yeah,
them are big franchise starters, some are like Drive Miss Daisy was based on a play by Alfred Ury, which,
yeah,
got so much Oscar attention. I mean, the world of the movies in this time, in the late '80s, early '90s was just incredible. The volume was incredible.
yeah,
So I'm curious as to your opinion as we sit now, and so much of the movie businesses sits on streaming. And, right now at this time of the year, I think there's 2 very big movies coming out, but it's I think probably the 2 biggest movies of the year, Wicked and Gladiator 2. I feel like we don't have these huge moments so much anymore. And to look back and to see this many, by the way, this the same year was also Dances with Wolves, Flatliners, Misery, Edward Scissorhands, Goodfellas, Steel Magnolias. I mean, it's incredible
yeah.
in one year.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it? For 1 year, yeah. I mean, obviously I must have. Well, I did look at that when I was doing the book, but yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Look at the diversity there, and there's really no franchise movies in that list at all, is there? Well, there's a couple.
Yeah, there's just Die Hard and Back to the Future, but I mean, other than that, I mean, they're unique film. I mean, like, Ghost, what a unique concept. Pretty Woman. I mean, these are real, original ideas, and I think that, Hollywood always gets criticized for, trying to continuously mine the IP machine, and Total Recall is based on IP. It's not a sequel, but it is, based on previous material. So, I mean, how are you seeing there's been so much talk about on the business side of the industry with mergers and acquisitions and things,
Mm.
what Hollywood will look like. Are you excited and optimistic about the future of filmmaking and Hollywood films, big Hollywood films, or is it do we you know is it going to be more of the same for a little while?
I don't know. I'm not really not the best person to ask about that, to be honest. I think people always seem to be pessimistic about the way movies are going, and eh, my honest answer is I don't know. I don't know. I like I said, I think people tend to be pessimistic, and uh, still great movies get made. Yeah, I mean, looking at that list from 1990, I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? That was obviously a quite an amazing year, but I don't know. I don't really know enough about how the industry works to really give you a good answer to that. I mean, I'm hopeful. Obviously, I think there's always good movies get made. I do think, yeah, just seems recently the reliance on, um, yeah, like I said, franchise movies. But seem that seems to be not coming to an end, but I don't know. It seems to be somewhat turning a corner there. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think that people need a real reason to go to the cinemas again. I mean, I think especially post COVID, it's
Oh, yeah, that's very true.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
for my work, I go to a lot of film festivals, which is great because the audience is truly excited. Everyone is very quiet, and
yeah,
there's it's kind of just really thrilled. I mean, it's an audience, a room full of true movie buffs. And so it's a different kind of experience in going to a movie theater where sometimes people are just like on their phones and they're taking their kids as a babysitting exercise. It just depends.
yeah. That's true. Yeah, no, that does. Yeah, that does worry me. Yeah, but again, people have been, pronouncing the death of the movie theater for a long time now, and hasn't happened yet,
Well,
thankfully.
I'm hoping that like radio, like book publishing, it amazingly always bounces back. I mean, even especially for the world of books, this is an incredible year because like places like Barnes and Noble, where I'm sure you can get this, they're opening more stores now, which
They
is
are. Yeah, yeah, and that's, across the board, that's a really encouraging sign, isn't it? I think that again, that was something one of the good things that came out of the pandemic is people started reading again, and bookstores are popular again, and there's been a big rise in independent bookstores. So you never know. Yeah, and I mean, going back to movies and movie theaters. I mean, that again, when home video was first a thing, that was the point where people said, "Well, it's the death of the movie theater," but it wasn't. I mean, I know it's that movie theaters not in the kind of shape they were, in their heyday, but yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think they're ever going to go away. But again, I think the point about that is yes, you said people have to have a reason to want to go and see a movie in a movie theater now, so it has to be something big and spectacular and
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for this moment, this coming, couple weeks with both Wicked and Gladiator 2 because the
yeah,
press tour alone has been remarkable. Everyone is hitting every red carpet and everyone's getting the word out. So I think those will be
yeah.
very well attended.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think so. And then, what was it last year, the year before? We had Barbie and Oppenheimer, which were,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
massive, massive hits with audiences in movie theaters. So yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it. This is a wonderful time of the year to be not just the end of year movies, but also going to the bookshops. And you mentioned independent bookstores. So before I let you go, can you tell me in around you or you're here in LA where I know you spend some time, do you have a favorite independent bookshop that you like to go to?
Larry Edmunds bookstore on the Hollywood Boulevard is fantastic. That's historic. That's been there for I think that, well, not in the current location, but it's been the Larry Edmunds bookstore has been around since the 1920s, I believe. That's a great bookstore for movie books. Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, I'd have to say that's my favorite bookstore in LA. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I like the Barnes and Noble as well.
Yeah, people can go find it and check it out. Again, the book is called Total Recall: The Official Story of the Film by Simon Braund. Thank you so much for chatting with me. This is great. I love
Oh,
talking about the movies,
my
and
pleasure.
it's the book is so well done and such a wonderful blast from the past and a real joy to read. So thank you.
No, great. Well, great. Glad you enjoyed it. Good.
Very good. Well, have a good holiday season. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. All right. Bye now.
Ciao.